It started as a petty dispute over a first-class seat on a transatlantic flight. It ended with an entire plane being bought, a billionaire's chilling display of power, and one woman brought to her knees. The hum of the Boeing 777 was my lullaby. It's a sound I'd grown to associate with a sense of calm, the gentle white noise before the 10-hour stretch of organized chaos across the Atlantic. As the lead flight attendant, I was doing my final checks of the first-class cabin. Everything was perfect. The champagne was chilled. The amenity kits were placed just so, and the scent of leather and quiet luxury filled the air. Passengers were beginning to trickle in, their faces a mixture of travel weariness and quiet anticipation. Then she boarded. You know the type before they even open their mouth. She was a woman in her late 50s, draped in a beige pantsuit that was trying very hard to look expensive. A cloud of cloying floral perfume entered the cabin a full 2 seconds before she did. Her eyes, sharp and critical, swept across the cabin, dismissing the other passengers, dismissing me, as if we were all just part of the set dressing for her life. Her boarding pass was for seat 3B, a perfectly lovely window seat, but her gaze landed on 1A, the throne, the seat with the most legroom, the most privacy, the one everyone secretly covets. And it was, for the moment, empty. I saw the gears turning in her head. I started to move towards her, a polite smile already forming on my face, to gently guide her to her assigned seat. But I was too slow. With a theatrical sigh, she tossed her oversized designer handbag onto seat 1A, slid her carry-on into the overhead compartment with a loud thud, and settled into the plush leather as if she'd been born there. She didn't ask. She didn't even glance around to see if it was taken. She simply claimed it. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice light and professional, "I believe your seat is just a little further down, in row 3. She looked up at me, not with surprise, but with pure, unadulterated annoyance. "This one is empty," she stated, as if that was the end of the discussion. "It's much better. I'll just sit here." "I'm afraid it's not empty, ma'am," I explained patiently. "It's assigned to another passenger. They just haven't boarded yet. I can help you find your seat. 3B. She gave a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Well, when they get here, we can discuss it. First come, first served, isn't that what they say?" She pulled the complimentary noise-canceling headphones from their packaging and placed them over her ears, a clear signal that the conversation was over. My stomach tightened. I've dealt with my fair share of difficult passengers, but this level of brazen entitlement was something special. This was going to be a problem. 5 minutes later, he boarded. He was the complete opposite of the woman in beige. Tall, poised, and dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. He moved with an unhurried grace that commanded attention without demanding it. There was a quiet intensity about him, a stillness that made the bustling cabin feel suddenly silent around him. He wasn't flashy. His watch was elegant but understated, and he was carrying a worn, leather-bound book, not a tablet. He paused at the front of the cabin, looked at the woman in his seat, and then met my eyes with a calm, questioning gaze. He was holding a boarding pass that clearly read, "Sterling, Malachi, seat 1A. I took a deep breath and approached the woman again. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the passenger assigned to this seat has arrived. I really must ask you to move to your assigned seat now." I gestured towards the man, who stood patiently, his expression unreadable. She peeled one headphone off, her face contorting into a sneer. She looked the man up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that dripped with condescension. It was a look I'd seen before, and it made my blood run cold. "Him?" she said, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Are you sure? Perhaps you should check his ticket again, dear. There must be a mistake." Mr. Sterling didn't flinch. He simply extended his hand, presenting the boarding pass to me. His eyes, however, never left the woman's face. "There is no mistake," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that cut through the tension. "You are in my seat." The woman scoffed. "I highly doubt that. I'm a Platinum Medallion member. I was here first. I'm not moving." This was it, the point of no return. The rules are crystal clear. I signaled to my colleague to alert the gate agent, and prepared to inform her that if she refused to comply, she would be removed from the aircraft. The whole cabin was watching now, an awkward, silent theater of confrontation. But before I could speak, Mr. Sterling held up a single hand, a silent request for me to wait. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue. He simply pulled out his phone, a sleek, minimalist device. He tapped the screen once, put it to his ear, and turned slightly away, affording the woman a sliver of privacy she didn't deserve. I could only hear his side of the conversation, and it was unnervingly brief. "Marcus," he said, his voice calm and level. "We have a situation on the K-788. Yes, at JFK. A passenger is refusing to vacate my seat. No, that won't be necessary." He paused, listening. The woman in beige watched him with a smug, triumphant smirk, as if she'd just won a great victory. Then Mr. Sterling spoke his final words into the phone, his voice dropping to an almost chillingly soft tone. "Just by the plane." He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his suit pocket, and looked at me. A few seconds of complete, deafening silence passed, and then the captain's voice crackled over the PA system, sharp and urgent. "Attention all crew and passengers. For reasons we cannot disclose at this time, all boarding procedures have been terminated. This flight is cancelled." A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin, followed by a wave of confused, angry murmurs. Phones were immediately whipped out. A man in 4D started yelling about a critical meeting in London. The spell of luxury was shattered, replaced by the raw, ugly frustration of travel plans imploding. My own mind was a frantic mess of questions. Could a person do that? Could someone just buy a plane? It sounded like a line from a movie, a ludicrous boast, but the captain's voice, tight with shock and stress, had been unmistakably real. The flight was cancelled. The woman in seat 1A, however, looked perversely pleased. She pulled off her headphones with a smug flourish, a triumphant little smirk playing on her lips. "Well," she announced to the cabin at large, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction, "I hope he's happy, making a scene, getting the whole flight cancelled for everyone just because he didn't get his way." She looked at Mr. Sterling as if he were a petulant child who'd just thrown his toys out of the pram. She still had no idea. She thought she was the protagonist of this story, the wronged party who had bravely stood her ground. She thought his grand gesture was an act of spite, not a transaction. Mr. Sterling simply watched her, his expression unchanged. He was an island of unnerving calm in a sea of chaos. He gave me a brief, almost apologetic glance, as if to say, "Sorry you're caught in the middle of this." My training kicked in, a familiar autopilot sequence in moments of crisis. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice hopefully sounding far more composed than I felt. "Please remain in your seats for a moment. We will begin deplaning shortly. Please check that you have all your personal belongings." My colleagues and I moved through the cabin, our faces stony masks of professionalism, fielding the barrage of angry questions with non-committal answers. "We're waiting for more information from the ground crew." "We apologize for the inconvenience." "Yes, you'll be rebooked." The woman in 1A was the last to get up. She took her sweet time, gathering her purse and adjusting her beige pantsuit, clearly intending to make a grand, dramatic exit. As the line of disgruntled passengers shuffled towards the door, she made a point of bumping into Mr. Sterling's shoulder. "Some people," she muttered loudly, "have no consideration." He didn't even seem to notice. He just stood aside, gesturing for me and the other crew members to deplane ahead of him, a small act of courtesy that felt surreal in the circumstances. But the real shock wasn't on the plane, it was on the jet bridge. Instead of the usual 2 harried gate agents, there were at least half a dozen people in sharp, dark suits waiting for us. I recognized one of them immediately, David Chen, the airline's vice president of North American operations. His face was pale, and he was practically vibrating with anxiety. The moment he saw Mr. Sterling, he and his entourage bypassed every single passenger and rushed towards him, their faces a mixture of terror and profound deference. "Mr. Sterling, sir," David Chen began, his voice strained. "A profound apology for this unacceptable situation. We were not aware. The funds have been verified. The aircraft is yours for the charter. We can have it refueled and restaffed within the hour. Your original flight crew if you wish. Whatever you need." The woman in beige had stopped a few feet away, watching this exchange with a slack-jawed expression. The smugness was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. The gears were finally turning. She was starting to understand that this wasn't about a tantrum. This was about power on a scale she couldn't comprehend. She tried to regain control, to reassert her own importance. "Excuse me," she snapped, stepping towards the group of executives. "I need to file a formal complaint. This man," she pointed a trembling finger at Mr. Sterling, "made a threat that got our flight cancelled. I want him arrested. I want compensation for this nightmare." The executives didn't even look at her. They just parted like the Red Sea as Mr. Sterling finally turned his full, undivided attention to the woman for the first time. The air grew thick and heavy. His calm was more intimidating than any rage could ever be. "The flight to London is not cancelled, ma'am," he said, his voice soft but carrying with absolute authority across the now silent jet bridge. "It has simply been redesignated." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "As a private charter, my private charter." He looked from her to the other gawking passengers, then back to her. "The rest of these passengers will be compensated. They will be booked into hotels and placed on the next available flight tomorrow morning, with a full refund and a first-class voucher for their trouble." He took one step closer to her, his gaze unwavering. The woman shrank back, all the fight draining out of her. "You, however," he continued, his voice dropping even lower, "you are not invited. But since you seem to value choices and opportunities so highly, I'm going to give you one. You have two options, and you need to choose right now." The jet bridge had become a courtroom, and we were all the unwilling jury. The air, thick with the recycled scent of the terminal and the collective anxiety of the deplaned passengers, seemed to crackle around Mr. Sterling. The woman, I never did learn her name, she was just the woman in beige in my head, looked like a cornered animal. Her meticulously applied makeup couldn't hide the pale, clammy sheen on her skin. Her eyes darted from Mr. Sterling to the airline executives, who stood stiffly, their expressions carefully neutral, refusing to offer her any sort of lifeline. She was utterly, completely alone. "Your first option," Mr. Sterling began, his tone maddeningly reasonable, as if he were discussing menu choices, "is that we simply part ways. You collect your luggage and the airline will provide you with a refund for the price of your original ticket. You will then be placed on their permanent no-fly list, not just for this airline, but for all of our partner airlines as well. You will find it difficult to fly commercially out of New York for the foreseeable future." A low murmur rippled through the passengers who were still close enough to hear. A no-fly list. That wasn't just an inconvenience. For someone who prided herself on being a Platinum Medallion member, it was a death sentence to her entire way of life. It was a public branding, a scarlet letter of entitlement. The woman's jaw tightened. I could see the furious calculation in her eyes. She was weighing the humiliation against the practical consequences, and she didn't like the math. "Or," she snapped, her voice a desperate, brittle thing, "what's my second option? You're going to sue me for what? Sitting in a chair." She was trying to claw back some semblance of control, to paint him as the unreasonable aggressor. Mr. Sterling didn't even blink. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to David Chen, the airline VP. Chen immediately stepped forward, holding out a tablet. On the screen was a crisp, high-resolution photo. It was a close-up of the woman's face, captured by one of the airport's security cameras. But below it was text, rapidly scrolling data pulled from some deep, dark corner of the internet. "Your second option, Mrs. Karen Albright," Mr. Sterling said, the use of her full name landing with the force of a physical blow, "is a bit more complex." The woman flinched. The mask of anonymous entitlement was gone. She was known. "You see, Marcus, my head of security is remarkably efficient. In the 5 minutes we were on the tarmac, he learned quite a lot about you." He gestured to the tablet. "It seems you're the CFO of a mid-level textile import company, a company that, according to its latest quarterly filings, is heavily leveraged and currently under review for a rather crucial loan extension from Sterling Bank. My bank." The color drained completely from Karen Albright's face. She looked like she was going to be physically sick right there on the jet bridge carpet. The beige pantsuit that had seemed like a suit of armor now looked like a cheap costume. The textile company, the loan, the bank. It was all connected. A web she hadn't even known existed had just been pulled tight around her. It also seems, Mr. Sterling continued, his voice relentless, that your company's primary supplier in Vietnam has had some irregularities in its labor practices. Practices that would be of great interest to the international press and certainly to the ethics committee at my bank. The committee that, coincidentally, is reviewing your loan application this week. This was no longer about a seat on a plane. It had never been about the seat. The seat was just the catalyst, the tiny stone that had started an avalanche. This was about a collision of two worlds. Her world, built on petty displays of status and bullying service workers, had just crashed headlong into a world of silent, unimaginable power. A world where flights weren't just cancelled, but entire lives and livelihoods could be rerouted with a single phone call. He let the silence hang for a moment, letting the full weight of his words crush her. The other passengers were stock still, their own travel woes forgotten, captivated by this brutal, real-life drama. "So that is your second option, Mrs. Albright?" Mr. Sterling concluded, his voice soft again, almost a whisper. "You will get on your knees. Right here. Right now. And you will apologize. You will apologize to me for the inconvenience. You will apologize to this flight attendant." He gestured to me with a nod of his head, and I felt a jolt of shock. "For your disrespect. And you will apologize to every single passenger on this flight for your behavior." He paused, looking directly into her wide, terrified eyes. "And then, maybe, just maybe, I will tell my bank to approve your loan." The silence on the jet bridge was absolute. It was so profound you could hear the distant, tinny announcements from the main terminal and the hum of the ventilation system. Every eye was on Karen Albright. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, fury, humiliation, stark primal fear. Getting on her knees? Here? In front of all these people? Her entire identity? The carefully constructed facade of a platinum medallion member, of someone who matters, was about to be publicly dismantled. But the alternative, the ruin of her company, her career, the public exposure of whatever shady dealings her supplier was involved in, that was a different kind of death. She looked at Mr. Sterling, her mouth opening and closing silently, searching for a third option that didn't exist. She saw no mercy in his face, only a calm, unwavering expectation. She glanced at the airline executives, who stared determinedly at the floor, offering no support. Then her eyes swept over the faces of the other passengers, the people she had dismissed just minutes ago. She saw no sympathy, only a kind of grim, rapt fascination. We were all watching the inevitable outcome of a battle she had picked and catastrophically lost. With a shuddering, ragged breath, she took a shaky step back. The expensive fabric of her beige pantsuit whispered as she slowly, awkwardly, lowered herself to the ground. The first knee hit the industrial-grade carpet with a soft thud, then the second. She was on her knees in the middle of a crowded jet bridge at JFK, her designer handbag lying discarded beside her like a fallen soldier. Her head was bowed, her perfectly coiffed hair hiding her face. The triumph I should have felt was absent, replaced by a strange, hollow pity. It was a brutal medieval kind of justice. I am sorry," she whispered, her voice choked and barely audible. "Louder," Mr. Sterling commanded, his tone flat, without malice, like a director instructing an actor. "And look at them when you say it." She raised her head. Her face was blotchy, tears tracing paths through her foundation. Her eyes, red and swollen, met mine first. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking with the effort of holding back a sob. "I was disrespectful to you." She then turned her head, forcing herself to look at the assembled passengers. "And to all of you. I am sorry for my behavior. I'm sorry I ruined your travel plans." Finally, her gaze landed on Mr. Sterling, who stood over her like a monolith. "And I apologize to you, sir, for the inconvenience. It was the most excruciatingly painful 30 seconds I have ever witnessed." Mr. Sterling watched her, his expression unreadable. He let the apology hang in the thick, uncomfortable air for a beat longer, ensuring everyone had absorbed it. Then he gave a curt nod. "Get up." She scrambled to her feet, brushing non-existent dust from her knees, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She wouldn't look at anyone. She just grabbed her purse, turned, and fled down the jet bridge towards the terminal, a diminished figure swallowed by the crowd. She was gone. The tension broke instantly. A few passengers let out nervous coughs. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Mr. Sterling turned to David Chen. "See to it that every passenger is taken care of as I instructed," he said, "and double the compensation for my flight crew." They handled a difficult situation with professionalism. He looked at me and my colleagues, and for the first time, a hint of warmth entered his eyes. "My apologies that your day was disrupted. You're free to go home, or you may join me on the flight to London as my guests if you wish." Then, without another word, he turned and walked back onto the gleaming, empty Boeing 777. His plane. My crew and I exchanged stunned glances. London? As his guests? After a moment of silent communication, we came to a consensus. We politely declined his offer to the VP, citing the need to file our reports, but asked him to pass on our sincere thanks. Our work was done. As we walked back into the terminal, the buzz was already starting. People were talking, pointing, pulling out their phones to text the unbelievable story they had just witnessed. I never saw Mr. Sterling again. But a week later, a courier delivered a small, heavy box to my apartment. Inside was a simple, elegant card. It read, "For Grace Under Pressure, MS." Tucked beneath it was a solid gold lapel pin in the shape of a 777. And beneath that was a stock certificate. It was for a significant number of shares in Sterling Bank, worth more than I made in 5 years. The story of the woman who stole the billionaire's seat became a legend among the airline staff, a cautionary tale whispered to new recruits. For me, it was something more. It was a stark, unforgettable lesson that the world operates on levels most of us can't even see, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who holds all the power. And every time I put on my uniform, I feel the faint weight of that gold pin against my chest, a reminder of the day a flight was cancelled, and I saw an entire world change in the blink of an eye,